Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about rethinking how great game design happens. So, great game design doesn't just come from talent or vision. It can fall apart when good ideas get stuck, overlooked, or brought in too late. So today, we're going to explore how studios can adapt lessons from large teams to improve design input, make better informed decisions, and turn collaboration into better gameplay. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today with us I have none other than Rob K. Rob, how's it going, bud? And hey, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I'm excited to join.
Oh, I can't wait to get into this one, but first, for those of you who aren't familiar with Rob, he is an independent developer and design consultant at Rob K LLC. And Rob, I would love for you to kind of like dive in a little bit about your work, let's say as an independent developer, but also like as a design consultant. What kind of things are you doing helping others with?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Andrew. So I'm probably best known for my studio game design work. So I was the lead designer of both Guitar Hero and Rock Band at Harmonix.
Nice.
And I was director of design there as well. So I worked and grew the design team. And that kind of role as a game designer who's also leadership in studios is most of my background and history. But I also love making games with my own hands. And I made a little game called Slope, which was a prototype that I built to learn Unity. And it turned into a bit of an organic hit, had 150 million plays. And now I'm working on my second indie game, Kickabout.
Awesome. That's really cool story and stuff with that history and everything else. And love how like, you know, you apply to that information, knowledge and everything and making that cool little indie game with Kickabout. That aside, like when it comes to now the design and consulting work, what does that look like for some people?
Yeah, so I do kind of design leadership consulting mainly. So I'm doing like audits and workshops, helping design teams and broader development teams make new games. So I've worked in that capacity for Sony, Peloton, and then some VR companies as well, Wave XR and the Zoom.
Nice. So lots of cool different projects. And also I think it's pretty interesting too that you did a while back speak at GDC2. Tell us a little bit about that because I think it really fits in with what we're going to talk about later today.
Yeah, that was a fun talk I got to give way back in 2007. So Guitar Hero had taken off. We were building Rock Band, and myself and the producer on Rock Band, Tracy, did a joint talk at GDC where we talk about designing games for everybody. And so that was like a great kind of way of us talking a little about what did we learn about that at the time. And yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the conversation we're going to have today about how to the meat and potatoes of game design on a team, basically, and what I've learned over the years about how to do that well.
Oh, I love it. And I especially love meat and potatoes too. So all the better. And one quick thing I'm a little curious about. I mean, I get you're busy with your own projects, helping others. What kind of things do you do to unplug a little bit?
Yeah. So I like to get up. I live in San Francisco, but I like to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning to watch my team, Manchester United, play football.
I love
That's
it.
my every week get away from game dev that I love doing. I get on my WhatsApp channel with my mates back in the UK, and you know we trash talk as we're watching United play.
I absolutely love it. So I love how you unplug to plug in with your buds and everything else and just that camaraderie. Oh, it's great. I thank you for sharing that. Rob, we got to know you a little bit, but honestly, we're going to get to know you a little bit more. And how we do that, folks, is through the Q Box round. And that's just a few random questions I prepared here for Rob. So, Rob, I got to ask, are you ready for the Q Box round?
I'm ready.
Awesome. I love it. All right. First is, what's the most common mistake devs or studios make with their games?
I think the thing I've seen over and over again is teams playtesting too late. It's really easy to hold something close and not want to put it in front of people until it's ready. And that's usually too late.
Good point. Next is, and maybe a little deep, but why do you make games, man?
So, I kind of have always just felt the urge and the need to do it. And I think when I graduated, I did computer animation for my bachelor's. And when I graduated, my dad said, "So why games and not film? Why don't you go into film, do VFX, that kind of stuff, like a lot of my fellow graduates were doing?" And I'm like, "No, games are the new medium that hasn't been defined yet. There's still impact in this art form to have that is much harder to have in an art form like film." So like for me, it's the unity of like games being art and science together and always being challenging on both fronts. And that's clearly something you can spend your whole life and a lot more doing and having fun with. So that's why.
I love that story too. And I'm only going to digress for a moment because I had a similar realization in a different way. Because, my background, I went to film school and such. And over time, yes, I made career into marketing, but then it got into games. And part of that process, when I was kind of comparing the two, it's like I see a lot of similarities, but man, there's so much more agency when it comes to you as a player and how you can engage with these things. Where movies, yeah, there's a level of immersion and everything else, but there's something deeper and more to it. And I think you just encapsulate from your own experience exactly what that is. And it's just really, it's always exciting to hear people, especially those that like come from similar fields, such as like film and yourself, it sounds like, and making that or seeing like what games really captures in all of us. And I just always love hearing those stories.
Yeah, we're a young art form, and I think there's still a lot of kind of like virgin snow to go and make a splash in and create a new subtype of game. There's so many different types of games out there, right? Like even just calling them all games feels like we're missing vocabulary to describe what all of the different type of things are, right? You would never just call a film a video, but also a TikTok short a video, right? Like we haven't got, I think, our descriptions of all the different types. And it's not just platforms. It's not mobile games and console games. There's something else going on. That I think we need to articulate.
Such a good point. All right, last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
So I'm working, my game Kickabout is an iOS game, and I've been doing a lot of research into mobile. So I've been playing a lot of mobile games, and Subway Surfers City and A Slight Chance of Saw Blades are two that I've been playing a lot the last couple of weeks. And both of them are great games in their own terms, but it's the meta game of those games that I'm particularly interested in learning from. And I also I like playing games to exercise. I have a history of designing games to exercise, and I still play Beat Saber for exercise twice a week.
I think that might be my main reason for wanting to get a VR still, is like Beat Saber, and for the exercise purposes. And it's not only that, it's very empowering.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderfully executed game, but like the fact that you can also get a workout playing it just, adds a lot of value.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, no, thank you so much for sharing that and stuff. And I love like your approach and strategy is like part of it's like, hey, I'm having fun with these, but it's really for the meta experience and everything else. But also like, hey, I'm doing like such a great
I found the two
corporation.
get very interwoven, right? When you're in indie dev, you're like half the time you're subconsciously choosing games because you want to be inspired in different directions, and you know that is part of what can happen. So yeah, like I rarely just play a game just because, like I usually am interested in it. And it's the ton of reason, right? There's so many games out now.
Oh yeah, exactly. So awesome. Well, Rob, really appreciate you sharing that with us. And now let's get into the meat and potatoes. And like I led in folks with the intro, we're here to talk about rethinking how great game design happens. So Rob, to kick things off, when it comes to game design, where do you think that most teams, especially indie teams, get stuck or slow down?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think, like a lot of teams get stuck on just like the buy-in of their team. And I say that like, you'd often think, well, everyone's always enthusiastic about making games. Why is it tough to get buy-in? Well, I think a lot of times you kind of, if you don't have the communication right on a team, people aren't truly bought into the vision of the project, and they just want to make the widget that they're being paid to make. And they'll ask you, especially if you're the designer or you're the owner of the company, or you have some say in what a game or a feature should be, is people just like, give me the stack. And they're not bought in. They're just like, I need to have a spec, tell me what to do. And when that happens, you spend as a designer all your time writing that low level specification. And it takes a lot of time. It slows the whole thing down. And each time there needs to be an iteration to that as you're playing it, you need even more granular kind of feedback. And that's a sign, I think, of a lack of buy-in from the members of the team making the game, and taking ownership over the features that you're making, I think, is the way to go. That I've seen work on good games, successful games. And I think that lack of buy-in is a sign that things aren't going so well on that front.
I absolutely love this point. And actually, I think in a way it slightly relates to, I did a solo episode a few weeks ago talking about ownership, but everything that you just mentioned there, like the buy-in, how it relates to communication, ownership again. It's so interesting because it's like kind of what you just outlined. We go through this process and thinking about things in a way where, okay, what does this really mean? What does this mean in a vision? And meaning like we don't put as much or thought into it. So when it comes to then sharing it with others, communicating in whatever capacity with other team members, with other potential partners, or even with players, that surfaces, that buy-in is not really shown or conveyed, I should say. And when that happens, that's when all sorts of things can get stuck, slow down, or you're wondering why this is the case when it's really something else that can be that.
Yeah, totally. And I think it is kind of beholden on the vision holders on the project to both articulate what the vision is very crisply, which can be challenging, right? Like if you're like, I want to have this game with all of these different inspirations and features, like describing it in a couple of words or in like a sentence, so that other people can really digest it and have it be like a mantra for them every day. That's hard. And, we were lucky on Guitar Hero because the name itself was the fantasy that we were going after. And everybody who was working on the game knew what we wanted to go after. So it made it easier to communicate. But having a crisp vision statement is a tool in getting buy-in. And I think also having clear communication from the leadership of the project is always going to be like something that builds trust and gets buy-in. And then showing that you're good at listening to the team as well, right? You're not just talking to the team, you're listening to the team. And designers and leaders need to listen and really show that they can make the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
By listening.
It's such a good point too, because communication's key, obviously, but when it comes to that input, it's really essential. And on that note, I'm curious, in cross-functional teams, how can we go about creating a process where those ideas, that input can surface productively, right? Without derailing the game's direction? Because I'm sure we all have been in situations like, all right, I want to open this up. I want to be fair and mindful of these things, but I don't want to do too much because then it might be overwhelming or any number of other reasons. So what are things that can kind of surface this productivity and getting that input coming in?
There's lots of ways to do this, but I think the most common tool that every team is going to use is playtesting, right? Like you're going to have to play your own game. Like everybody has to do that. And having an internal playtesting process is like probably the biggest impact tool I could recommend here. We did this at Harmonix on Guitar Hero, Rock Band All the Games at Sony, on Concrete Genie, Peloton when I was working there as well. And having like a really good process for this, and there's lots of different ways to set up that process, I think can give everybody like buy-in and a voice in the game in a very meat and potatoes way, right? You need to playtest. So having lots of people on your team playtesting regularly with a little bit of rigor in how you organize that, how you set it up. So like at Peloton, we would have like a Thursday slot in the afternoon, 3 to 4 p.m. was a playtest every week. Everyone knew that. There were no meetings booked for that time. Everyone was expected to take part. And people could play, or they could watch other people playing and, get involved that way. Or they could be the one taking the notes. And we did take notes. We had a Google Sheet to collect all of those notes in. And everybody who was on the team was encouraged to add their own notes to that sheet in an organized format that as they were adding it, they were doing things like categorizing things as bugs or not, whether it was an art thing or an engineering thing. They were doing like a self-categorization that then made dealing with everybody's input much easier for the people who were responsible for that. And those people had a meeting the next day pre-booked to do that. So like, not to get too deep into it, but just have a process, right? Have like a process that you've come up with on how your team's voice is heard on a regular cadence on the game that you're building, so that everybody who's responsible for making the decisions on the game, the designers, the PMs, or whoever on your team is responsible for making those decisions has the best quality input, and then have it be something where there's transparency as they're making decisions. They're able to see the trail. People can check back maybe in the sheet, and they can see an action item column with which things are getting acted on, which one's going over to design for a conversation, which thing's being fixed by QA. It's actually, or it's an existing known bug, right? That's like half of the stuff is, it's known. It's like, if you're being transparent about that, it can be quick, and it doesn't have to be a heavy process if you design it that way.
I absolutely love this, because I think that's the key there is like those processes. They can really help surface these things, do a lot of heavy lifting, all this type of stuff to reveal the things that really need to, be focused on and everything else. In light of that process, though, I would imagine, though, too, that even with some teams, there can be like common ways that input, that design input, like starts breaking down across, different disciplines and stuff. Is there any way like teams can avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the design input can break down if it's not solicited in the right way, and it's not communicated transparently back on how the decisions are being made on what's happening. People don't want to feel like they're just throwing something into a void and then that's it. That's all they hear. And so like, you can also kind of have like, this breakdown of cohesion in a game, right? If you just kitchen sink it, you're like, everybody's idea is a good idea, and you just do them all. You're going to end up with like a completely incoherent game, right? So clearly there are people who need to ensure coherence, and it's usually those product owners, whether it's a PM or a designer or whoever, or an artist if it's an art issue that's going on, or engineering if it's a technical issue that's going on. So have a clear owner for each discipline, have a clear owner for each feature, have a clear owner for the product. And that way there's somebody on the team who's responsible for making those decisions, and then communicating, hopefully back in a light process that you come up with, which things are being acted upon. And you don't have to respond to every single piece of feedback. Like, people just want to make sure that they're heard and they can see the process for being heard. They don't want to be blindly followed on absolutely every suggestion they ever make, right? They want to trust that somebody with the responsibility on the team to make good decisions with the input they're getting is doing that.
So in that case, then I want to kind of like, you make some important call outs about having that clear owner, that clear vision, right? But like, if we were to like flip this, right? How then can we still stay open while still making those clear, decisive design calls?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to realize first that your job as a designer is to have the responsibility for cohesion in the design solutions you come up with. And as a designer, you're usually not the company owner, right? Like, maybe you are sometimes, like in a very small team, like I am at the moment on my indie dev game, but like usually you're not. So usually you've got other stakeholders above you that you have to bring in and keep in alignment with as well. And so like, this job of like taking input from all directions and then making clear, decisive design calls, that's design. That is absolutely like the discipline that you've got the responsibility to do. And I would recommend, first of all, treat it as a designer. Like, any designer in any discipline, and games are not an exception, designs based on problems. Like, the first thing you got to do is like actually define the problem you're trying to create a solution for. And a lot of teams fall down here unless they've had like a design background in training. Maybe they haven't heard that you should define design problems first. So, I'll give you an example.
Awesome.
So on Rock Band, we started that project off. We just made Guitar Hero. And we're like, great, we're going to make a drum game, and there'll be a guitar game, there'll be a singing game, you're playing them together, and you're going to be a band, right? And like, we get that up and running, and it doesn't feel like a band. It feels like games in parallel. The drumming game, the guitar game, the singing game. And so we had a problem suddenly, which is how do we make it feel like you're a band, not just four solo musicians playing in parallel. And so we had an experiential goal, make you feel like a band. And we solicited ideas on that from the whole of Harmonix on the message board system we had at the time, kind of pre-Slack. And we had loads of ideas posted and riffed on by the team. Everyone could see that, including upper management, all the stakeholders. And we would have design conversations with everybody, including the co-founders, Alex and Aron. They were on those forums too, mainly listening, sometimes posting. And that kept them aligned with what the studio was talking about. And as lead designer, I was responsible to listening to them and the team. And Alex, one of the co-founders, was taken with one of the ideas that a designer called Chris Foster posted about a revive mechanic. And so he's like, oh, revive mechanics in co-op games can be great and really make you feel like you're a squad. And so maybe we could use that to make you feel like you're a band. And this was a great idea. And I was also excited about it. And Greg, the project lead, was also excited about it. So, Alex was excited about it, Greg was excited about it, I was excited about it. Clearly, like, we should give this a try. And so that was quite an easy one, right? We knew we had a strong idea and we prototyped it and it came out well. There's other examples I could give where it's more challenging, but the real takeaways there for me are there's a clear problem. You've solicited the input in the first place, right? And then secondly, there's a cohesive solution, or you can see there's a path to a cohesive solution. A good solution is going to work. And then you've got alignment with everybody. And if you have the problem, the cohesion, and the alignment, then I think you're in a good spot to make good design calls.
I absolutely love that example, and even that, that whole story or whatever. It's like how that problem like surfaced, how it evolved, like because you also like kind of laid out what that vision was first too, right? And then from there you're like, but we're noticing this from that concept, that idea that we have, and then just go through that process and everything. A lot of what we've talked about here so far and everything, I'm sure some people are thinking like, this sounds great, but it also sounds like it could be maybe a little bit detailed in some of the processes and stuff to a degree. So I'm curious in terms of how maybe we could apply this, or how some indie teams could kind of like borrow some of these, let's say, bigger picture, bigger studio types things. So if we're to like distill some of these things, and what would you say are some practices that we could take that indie developers can realistically borrow or use without adding what they might feel or an unnecessary process, or even be a little overwhelming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nobody wants a heavy process, right? That's too much for their situation. And I've worked on teams from 1 to 150 people and various sizes in between that. And one thing that always remains the same is a good process is to set yourself tight deadlines. Okay. Right. So like, this shouldn't just be a big team thing. This should be like an indie thing, a solo indie thing. Like, deadlines are a tool, right? They're not like someone trying to mess you over. Everybody has a deadline. Everyone's going to run out of money. Like, you can't avoid that. So you might as well break it down into sub deadlines and use those as a forcing function. And what I've found as a designer is that deadlines aren't just a preserve of producers and project managers. They're a design tool that let you focus and simplify your design by giving yourself a tight deadline to make sure that get first cut of it up and running is going to be fast. And that focuses your mind. That means I only need what's most essential. And that should be how like good design usually happens, is by focusing on what's most essential and not on the kitchen sink approach, right? It's like, what do I really need to get this to work? And so what I personally do as a solo dev now is that I make sure I've got deadlines coming up, and, oh, look, there's a meetup coming up that maybe I can demo at that and get a playtest out of it and get some feedback. And then suddenly that meetup's not going to change its date for me, right? That meetup's happening next Thursday. So next Thursday is my deadline. And I can use that then to focus my design attention on what's going to be most important to get in the feature I want to get playtest feedback on that Thursday. And so like this, I think, is a good process. I did like a little 5-minute talk on the power of deadlines. That's on YouTube as well. And you can check that on my website. I'm a big believer in deadlines being a positive process for teams of all sizes.
And I love that you called out to that positive process too, because one thing you shared a moment too, because I know, some of us to a degree, myself included, like when we're trying to give ourselves deadlines, like we can be our own worst enemies. It could be a little overwhelming and stuff, but you even said so yourself, that I think is great. Because as you're saying this, I'm like, I know there's a psychological component here too, right? But you're calling out to like, looking at the positive side of things, of like, set what that deadline means, not as like something that can cause a negative feeling of like over whatever those emotions are, but also like, by doing that, I get to do this, and that is what's exciting me. That's what's moving me forward and stuff. And also, I think there's a lot of interesting, cool things that can come out of deadlines I'd want your take out of too. Like, for example, as you were sharing that and considering we have this familiarity with, film, right? I remember one time when I was working as a production assistant and stuff, and it was a time when we started moving over to, I think specifically, and this applies if we go back several years too, from digital format, from tapes. And the same thing applies to film, to actual tapes and whatever, right? And I remember at the time the producer was like, I don't know, it just feels weird, because this idea of I always have something there, or it's not physical, right? There's that. But the thing I'm calling out to is might be relating more towards film and tape. Was film is extremely expensive. It can roll on forever, and you're kind of working within that own deadline. Like, we only have so
It's a
many rolls.
constraint.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
constraint, exactly. But
Hmm.
because of those constraints, I mean, there's so many memorable moments in films and film history where those things happened because of the
Yeah.
constraints. And
Yeah.
that's just one analogy, but I what you're taking on
Yeah.
those
No,
things
it's
too.
it's a good example because sometimes like technology takes the constraints away, right?
Yeah,
Like technological improvements. So you have to think about, well, how do I add them back in so that I can actually give myself like a box to play in that is defined. So yeah, totally hear you. And yeah, deadlines to me help create that box, that constraint. And there's other tools too.
absolutely. So I love your take on that too. And let's put this back into perspective again, because I know, some of the things that you shared about before, we're talking about, larger teams, but I mean, you're a sole developer. So I'm curious too, like, how have you adapted in either whether it's a extension of what you shared or other things, like the benefits of this cross-functional input to, like,
Mhm.
a smaller, faster moving workflow? Because I'm sure you work with other partners and stuff, but for the most part, you're making kind of a lot of those main big calls.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me use my current game as an example. So I'm solo developing Kickabout, which is a table soccer game that will launch on iOS this summer, just before the World Cup. And the idea behind this came to me kind of like at the back end of last year. And as a solo dev, of course, I'm wearing all of the hats, right? I'm a designer, programmer, artist, production, QA, and I've got a pretty good technical and art background so that I can actually do that and be able to make the game. But I have to be really organized too about how I get input from like other people who I haven't got a team. So who else am I going to get input from as I go? And I've got game dev friends, of course, who I want to be able to share it with. And I do that, especially at the beginning. I was doing that a lot. I was having like little coffee meetings with trusted friends. They play the game one-on-one. I'd take a bunch of notes, just let them play, try and not just be that person who demos the game rather than letting somebody play it, right? That's a very hopefully pretty 101 thing, is like let them play and then like take all the notes. And then once I was ready and I felt like I'd iterated enough to have something that I could share with a wider group, I took it to my local meetup. And I knew, like, I'm in San Francisco. We've got this San Francisco game development meetup, which is awesome and happens every month or two. And they had a winter indie showcase in December of last year. So I reached out to them, was like, oh, can I show my game in your showcase and get some playtest feedback? And they were, yeah. So that was a great way. I then used like a Google sheet that I set up in order to collect feedback. I had a little QR code so people could scan it, or I'd just like give them the survey directly. And usually you've got a lot of friendly code dev type situations at local meetups that you can take advantage of. And so that was, a more agile like approach for how to get that kind of feedback. I did that at the GDC party that they had as well. That was great for feedback. And finally, I made the demo that I made for GDC also available because it was a test flight build. I had it up on iOS Test Flight, which is their like private beta testing program. I could have a public link that I could then share with people at GDC. So there was like thousands of people came through the GDC party that the SF Game Dev Meetup held. And I was able to give hundreds of them builds of the game to play. And then I had a little link in the corner of the game that they could click and go to my Google survey. And I got some great feedback through that, as well as analytics as well. So I could tell more about how people were playing it and whether they were retaining over time, even just on the demo. So yeah, I'm trying to always listen to other devs, listen to other players as soon as you're in a position to do that. And even as a solo dev, there's lots of tools to do that these days.
Yeah, and I really love how you called out to, like, you listed so many good different ideas, especially ones I would say for most. I know not everybody because of where they may be located, but I still see what you were listing off gave me even a lot of ideas on where else you could go. But Friends is going to be the quick one. And I know sometimes there's that, like, oh, do I really trust this friend? Or are they just going to say nice things to me? Because there's always that that angle of things. But I think, you should know who it is within your own immediate network that is going to be that person, or the person that might, even if they're overcritical, like just look at
Hmm.
what, I mean, that's probably going to be the best type of feedback from that friend or even family member, where that's where it really comes into play and is extremely helpful. The meetups makes complete sense and such, and I think I'll push for some people who are like, oh, maybe it's not as big as like a metropolis or a city or whatever that has these types of groups. Well, there could be smaller settings where maybe it's just a small group of D&D players that also would probably be interested in the type of game that you have. I know that we had a past guest that also has a whole network of video game clubs in school systems that those,
Hmm.
if it pertains to that audience especially, that's another avenue. Or like when you're even talking about more public things, let's say, even if it's not events, like there's libraries, there's other things that maybe there's something you can find that like a common thread somehow, even though it's not game related, that people would welcome something
Hmm.
different and fun and energetic about games. So I love how you're it's like you have so many different ways of doing this, and then at the end of the day, what does this come down to? You have all this input, you have all this data that you can then
Hmm.
start including into your process and everything else, making better, more informed decisions as you move forward.
Yeah, yeah. I think like collecting feedback from trusted friends at the beginning and then everybody over time is like essential. And also, if you're gonna be a solo dev, like it can be a lonely life, right? On your own, get out there and meet people and take your game with you. And yes, you're gonna like get like the friend factor in the feedback. You mentioned that, and you shouldn't take the scores that you get from, if you give them like rate me out of five, they're gonna give you 4 or 5. Like they're
Yeah.
giving you a 4 to make it look realistic or something. Your game could be a 2. Like you don't know from that group, but they're going to give you good qualitative feedback. They're going to tell you, and you're going to watch them play. You're going to be like, oh, they got stuck on that snag in my game that everyone gets stuck on. Why do 3 people get stuck on that snag? Oh, that's my fault, right? I need to go fix that. Yeah, it's always essential. And I think my analogy when I'm on a big team as well, and I'm explaining why we play test every week, why it's so important, is it's like if you're a painter and you close your eyes, that is what it would be like to make a game without a playtest. Because you're not crafting a game, you're crafting a player experience.
Yeah.
And you don't actually see that player experience until you watch players experience your game. And so it really is like painting blind if you don't playtest all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's even a level where, let's say, it can be a tough exercise for some, but if you're playing that game and really doing your best to take yourself out of your shoes and into a player's, you're still going to look at that experience with a particular lens, no matter how far you remove yourself from that. So, like you said, it's those players, having them get their experience and stuff, because the reality of it too is everybody's going to be different. Everybody might solve problems differently. They might run into problems differently. You don't know that until you start throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I'm curious too now, as we come to closing and stuff, for anybody with, like, let's say even a small indie team. How do you know when? Because I'm sure this can happen too. When more collaboration about ideas, concepts, things that are currently being worked on is improving the design and where the project's going versus just adding friction. Because I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we get this input where it sounds constructive, but it could be a boiling frog syndrome where we get in, it's comfortable, but the temperature is slowly rising, and the next thing you know, we don't even know it's boiling.
Yeah, I think, collaboration, like how do you know the results are good, basically,
Yeah.
is I think what you're saying here. And I think for me, again, you will know the pieces of your design that hopefully you've articulated problems, you collected the solution ideas, you've implemented the solutions. Then how do you test? You play test, right? And you should see those problems being solved in play testing. So I think it really is like a super tool, right? Playtesting is a super tool in that respect. And then I also like thinking about like, there's always a question about when to be collaborative versus when to be like, independent. Just go do it rather than collecting
Execute.
everybody together. Let's all have a meeting. No, you shouldn't do that all the time, obviously, too. Right. So like, I like this adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. So like for me, both sides of the adage are true. Right. If
Mm.
you want to go fast, do something quickly, just get it done. Do it yourself or give it to somebody to do themselves. And if you want to go far and you have like a big problem that's going to take multiple people to go far and go together, then do that. And so, if you want a wide pool of ideas, if that's the problem you're trying to solve, we haven't got enough ideas on this particular space that we now realize is important in our game, then go together because it's faster to go together to get all that hive mind on the problem. But then maybe you've had all of those kind of group meetings. You're like, okay, now we're going to just need to prototype this idea and this idea. Sometimes prototyping is faster done alone or in a pair. Like it really is. Like a big team can go slowly on prototypes in a way that like one or two people can go really fast. So maybe that's a thing where you need to go fast or alone, and you give them to individual people for like some time box, like a week, 2 weeks or something, and then have them come back together then and see the results. Use the right process, fits your game, fits your team and your needs, and just be mindful of whether you're trying to go fast, on a well understood thing. Maybe just do something quickly, go alone on it. Or if you want to go far and you need that hive mind, you need like the benefit of like everybody on the team piling on it.
I absolutely love that adage right there, because what's really cool too is it's not like one or the other. It's dynamic depending on where you are in your journey, where's your play and stuff. And it's funny, like sometimes, and this, I could see how this could be applied in a lot of different ways too. Like, for example, sometimes we might be really focused, honed in on a certain type of thing we're researching or that we're learning about. And I have my own personal experiences with this, with some podcasts. I listen to certain types and really take it all in. And then I'm like, wait a minute. While it relates, it's somewhat different too, where it's like, okay, now I have all this information, but what am I doing with it? Right. And then it's like, all right, now I got to change. It's like, I don't need any more inputs here. I need to just move forward and stuff. Right. And then again, maybe I might need that information, and that information could be what you're talking about, the, go together, that collaboration aspect. And it's like ebb and flow. It's something that's dynamic, that's always changing based off of your needs. But I think you call out an important thing is recognizing when those needs arise and being mindful of that, because if not, that's another area where we can get stuck.
Yeah. I think it's, a lot of times you develop that good judgment over which is a together problem versus which is an individual problem just through experience. And you get a gut feeling for, I've done this kind of thing before. This usually goes faster if there's multiple people on it versus just me or just one person. And so I think, really the meta advice there is just make lots of games. Get reps. The more reps you get, and making small games helps you get reps, the better judgment you'll have on, when to give it to a whole team versus do something individually.
Absolutely. Oh, such great stuff here. And I know we covered so much in this episode and everything else. Out of what we discussed, what are some like key takeaways, tips that listeners could walk away with?
So you won't be surprised to hear me say play test early and, use that to simplify your design and to work efficiently and to test like how things are going before you release it to the wild, right? Like, obviously, playtest early. Second tip I'd say takeaway is like get buy-in, get that ownership and buy-in that makes games magically good because everybody's going in the same direction by including your team in the design process. And then there's kind of like a diligence to all of this, right? You've got to plan these things. They don't just happen, right? So there's proper, I love this saying, it's cringy in some ways, but like proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I love it. That's awesome.
It's true.
It is.
It's true,
yeah.
right? It's like diligence matters. So just, plan to get that buy-in from your team, plan to play test regularly, and things will go well.
Awesome. I absolutely love those tips, especially the last one. Great use of alliteration there, by the way. And Rob, it's been a pleasure having you. If people want to learn more, connect with you, what are ways that they can do that? Please drop us some links.
Yeah, so my website is robkay.com, and I've got like all of my links are available there. Feel free to reach out to me on any of the social channels. I'm on basically everything but Twitter because I won't go into that. But I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube and LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. So yeah, please get in touch. And yeah, if you like see me on LinkedIn and you want to reach out, let me know that you were, a listener to Andrew's podcast here. You're part of this community, and I'll accept your request. I'd love to connect with you too.
Awesome. Well, hear that, folks. Well, again, appreciate that, Rob. And yeah, lots of ways to connect with Rob. And of course, those will be in the show notes. And if you are on LinkedIn, go out, reach out, just say, hey, heard you on the podcast. And Rob will gladly connect. And hopefully a cool conversation happens out of that. Rob, I can't thank you enough for all this insight today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks for hosting these conversations, Andrew. I love that you do this podcast. I think it's a great thing for the game dev community. So thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.